Welcome back. The program is Agenda. We're live from the studios of TV3. My name is Matilda Asante-Asiedi. We're looking at incumbency abuse. Is it a reality or a myth? How can we check it if it really exists in our body politic as we work towards campaigning 2016 elections? Let's meet our guests in the studio. We've got Mr. Johnson Esiedun Ketia. He's the General Secretary of the National Democratic Congress. They call him the only general in politics. I'm sure you know why. Mr. John Boedu is the acting general secretary of the New Patriotic Party. In a moment, we'll be joined by Mr. Jacob Osayeboa. He's also an engineer and a former independent presidential candidate. We'd like to hear your views, 1734, across all the networks. Incumbency abuse, is that a myth or a reality? And if it is, what do you think we can do to check it? Gentlemen, good evening. Thank you for making time to join us. Okay, so I want to start by looking at some general definitions that we have had based on our own experiences. CDD, for instance, in its 2004 election monitoring report, says that is the blatant partisanship amongst non-partisans, politicization of access to public facilities, turning official events into campaign rallies, privatizing public goods for partisan purposes, and non-resignation of civil public servants who decide to contest elections. The IEA says abuse of incumbency means use of state vehicles, state security apparatus, state officials, state venues, paraphernalia, state helicopters to distribute campaign materials. I'm sure that's something that John Boedu will be familiar with. So what's your, I don't know, how do these definitions sit with you? Let me start with you, General. Are they consistent with what you know? Because in the past you used to cry wolf over incumbency abuse as well.
Thank you very much. I think that I would like to look at this incumbency problem by first looking at what constitutes, drawing a differentiation between incumbency advantage and incumbency abuse.
Sure.
Because incumbency doesn't only confer advantages, it also confers very serious disadvantages.
Sure.
And that is why some amount of incumbency advantage is permissible, no matter who is in government. But when you come to talk about abuse, I think first of all, we have to, all those definitions cover some aspects of incumbency abuse or whatever it is. But before you can approach a scientific assessment of what constitutes incumbency abuse, every nation must seek to define in its laws what amount of incumbency advantage is permissible.
Do we have
and
that?
Then so when people go beyond it, you can begin to talk about abuse.
But
because we don't have the standards, so people are confused between incumbency use and incumbency abuse. There was some attempt to deal with that one. The first attempt to deal with that one happened somewhere in 1997, thereabouts, when MPP had then joined us in Parliament for the first time, and there was a strong motion tabled before Parliament which sought to prevent President Rawlings from using state facilities when he was going round. They sought to differentiate between going round as a president and going round as a presidential candidate. That motion was debated, and the terms of the motion included maybe surcharging the NDC whenever the president traveled with the state facilities to campaign. But unfortunately, the motion was lost, and it remained in the books until when President Kufuor came to power. Then we saw him also doing worse things than what President Rawlings was doing. So we in minority then drew the attention of our majority folks to the motion they themselves had pushed before and whether they thought it could now be revisited.
And what was the feedback?
They said no.
So as you said, you don't have anything.
They said they didn't have anything wrong with it.
Okay.
So that appears to have settled this in. And since then, everybody began talking about the abuse in terms of the number of vehicles in the convoy. So they started abandoning the idea of whether the president should use state facilities at all,
not.
and now jumped to the number of vehicles that are permissible in the convoy.
Okay, we'll come to the details of
so
what...
those were the things. So I believe that this thing can be addressed when we sit as a parliament and make rules. When we define it properly, then we'll begin to be talking about use and abuse. Otherwise, we are confusing use and abuse.
All right, John. The NPP has been already talking about the president's tour, accounting to the people tour, as an example of incumbency abuse. The PPP has similar concerns as well.
I think that, well, you can play around with. For most of us in politics, we understand what really abuse of incumbency is about.
What is your understanding of it?
The definition, all the definitions that you've given fit into what abuse of incumbency is about. It's basically the use of state resources by public officials for purposes of campaigning for themselves.
Okay, let's take the in office. Let's take the president. He's a sitting president. He's also the candidate of the NDC. So, where do you find the abuse? Should he be going on a campaign tour in his private vehicle, for instance? Should the state security be supporting him?
That is where definition and making clear rules of what
Now, would you call that abuse or an advantage?
It depends on how it is used. For instance, if you clearly state that you are accounting to the people, meaning that you are working only that. I haven't seen such an accounting before where only one side of the balance sheet is shown. And that's the first I've seen an accounting to the people where expenditure is shown, revenue is not shown. That's the first step. If you are doing so, you do so on the basis of resources given to you, and also letting the Ghanaian people realize or know the resource, what you've used the resources for. It should end there. If you go ahead and use that as a basis to solicit support, and for that reason you should be voted for, obviously it's campaigning. Obviously it's campaigning. This is very different from where, for instance, the first year of government, and sometimes it's the timing of it, very, very critical. You understand? Because nobody says that as a government, there's no need for you to project what you've done, which can be done all the time.
So from where he sits in this instance, is he using incumbency to his advantage, or is he abusing it?
He's abusing it.
Why?
He's abusing it because as a president, if you go around telling people what you've done and not using it as a basis for calling on them to vote for you again for a second term, it is the call for a vote for you for a second term.
So the line about calling for a vote for a second term, that then makes it an abuse?
It does, really. It does. Really. It's just about president going around doing his normal presidential duties. Nobody complains about it. It depends on even the content of what is being said. You understand? So for instance, and sometimes if you limit it, you get it wrong. Because it's not just the convoy that you see. The kind of resources that DCEs, MCEs, regional ministers put in some of these programs, you marvel. It is even more and far bigger than even the convoy of the president. You understand? Especially where in some of these cases people must be conveyed, people must be buzzed.
Would it have made any difference if it wasn't in an election year? Let's say he did it in 2015.
Nobody complains when it is not an election year. Nobody complains, especially where it is not used to solicit vote for the individual in question. You understand?
You're welcome back. The program is Agenda. We're looking at incumbency abuse. Is it a myth or a reality? And how can we check it? Send us your messages 1734 across all networks. As you will know, Agenda now airs on Saturdays between 6 and 7 p.m. So call a friend to text a friend and let them tune in and watch us. We've just been joined by Mr. Jacob Osei-Yeboah. He's an engineer and a former independent presidential candidate in the 2012 elections. So are you contesting this year?
Sure.
You are?
Contesting, yeah.
Okay, as an independent candidate or what?
Sure, depending on how the dynamics will be, especially if there's a coalition of the minor political parties, then that is where the independent presidential system sits.
Yes. Okay. So is there a coalition? Have you guys been talking about a coalition?
There are some discussions going on, so...
Shouldn't you have known that by now? We've got 7 months to an election.
Oh, you know, with this sort of discussions, egos come to play and things like that. So you need to manage some of these things, and then at a point in time, you see how it goes. In 2012, it was the same thing, and that is why when it failed, then I also launched myself as an independent.
Okay, so who are you talking to?
No,
just out of curiosity.
That one I cannot comment now.
Okay.
Yeah.
So we're talking about incumbency abuse or advantage. General Mosquito thinks is an advantage that the president has, whoever is seeking political office has. John thinks is an abuse. I mean, from where you sit, does the president, for instance, storing on his accounting to the people tour constitute an abuse? And realistically, should we expect the president to go in a private vehicle without security, or not expect a minister to meet him when he arrives in the region?
First and foremost, when we talk about incumbency, it's a period in which someone is in a position. And we all know that every president period ends 6th of January, okay? And for that matter, within that period, anything that goes with the presidency, the president would have to go with it. And so you cannot say that the president is moving and because there's an election, the national security shouldn't do their job. No, they wouldn't allow that. The president is supposed to be protected until the time that he's actually leaving office. And for that matter, it's actually a thin line. And much is also dependent on maybe the circumstances. And
let's look at one. This accounting to the people.
I wanted to define something. You see,
sure, go on.
Especially when we talk about government. A government is made up of the executive, the legislature, and the judiciary. And I don't see the president moving with all of these people. And for that matter, you cannot say that the government is actually abusing anything.
So can you say the president, at least, is the only one from where you sit?
No, the president had to go with whatever machinery that the states provide.
Okay, so you don't see an abuse of
it's rather an advantage.
Okay.
And it will depend on maybe the circumstance that we might want to discuss into detail. Maybe.
So okay, so that brings me to the point. Must the president be accompanied by DCs, regional ministers, NDC executives in this accounting to the people tour?
It depends. If the president is visiting a region where there is a prominent minister, for instance, he will want to accompany the president for his people to see him. And again, if the president is visiting things that pertains to a particular sector, then the sector minister ought to be there. So those are the things that define who accompanies the president. For instance, the president is going to go to Brong-Ahafo next week, and surely I'll be there. So, but I wasn't there in Volta region, I wasn't there in Western region, and so on.
Is the president campaigning?
Well, it doesn't matter whether he's campaigning or not campaigning. I don't draw any.
What do you call what he's doing? Is it a campaign or what is it?
I don't know. You can give it whatever name. But if it is campaigning,
NDC, is it part of your strategy?
Listen. You have countries where there is a specific period for campaigning.
Sure.
So that after elections, say in Denmark, everybody's billboard is pulled down. Nobody, opposition people, nobody engages in any political activity. But we are not operating that system. In Ghana here, right after the election, the opposition groups are already campaigning. So if the president is campaigning back, there's nothing wrong. Again, it boils down to the rules. So if...
So where there's no law, there's no offense. Is that what you're saying?
I'm saying that if the opposition candidates, for instance, can go accusing the president in all the 4 years. Is it fair to say that the president should not be responding to those? That is where the problem comes in. So I'm saying, as a country, if you want to make the laws, we can make the laws. In Denmark, 3 months to election, they open the space for campaigning. Immediately after election, they pull down everybody's billboard. The laws are very clear. Nobody engages in campaign. But the system we are running, everybody is campaigning 24 hours, 365 days a year, and so on. So campaign is continuous from the day of the election, and it goes on. So I mean, when you look at some of the definitions that are contained, saying that when it comes to campaign period, the president should resign, should MPs
I think
resign.
they're talking, in that respect, they're talking about public sector officials. For instance, a director at a ministry. I think
So
we
if
had
the
examples
president is
from
not
the past.
resigning, why should the director at the ministry resign
Because
when the president controls
the director is
more
supposed
authority?
to be non-partisan, neutral public servant.
Those ones have laws backing them. That one, there is no issue about it. There are laws backing them. But if it is about
And
somebody
DC
retaining his position whilst campaigning, if you stretch it, then we won't have parliament when we get, and there must be a period for campaigning, so during which everybody resigns as a member of parliament and goes back to contest. Everybody resigns, and so you see how ridiculous the whole thing is. So it's better to talk about the abuse of incumbency in terms of, let's say, occupying the media space to the exclusion of opposition parties. When the president is visiting a place where a party had already organized to conduct an event, then you come in and say that
president is coming,
because the president is coming, your rally cannot come on, and so on.
But you guys do that.
Those are the things that should be avoided.
Very well.
But not just the president moving with state resources, because it is impossible for any president to just hire taxis and be moving around.
Well, that's cheeky. 1734 across all networks, incumbency abuse, a myth or a reality, and how can we check it? We'd like to hear your views as you watch us. So this is not peculiar to President Mahama, though. President Kufuor was accused of same. President Mills, he tried to find a way around it. I'm not sure how successful that was. And now we have President Mahama. Former President Rawlings suffered the same. So why do we keep going through this vicious cycle? And why is it that as a people we haven't been able to clearly define so we can track, monitor, and perhaps name and shame? John?
It's because we tend to play the ostrich. Just as Nkita is trying to, like you said, being cheeky in saying that the president cannot move around with taxis. I think all of us know. For instance, if you are a president, you are visiting a region. Obviously, all stakeholders that are needed in the region, all political figures that are needed in the region, depending on what exactly you are going to do, has to be there. But if it goes beyond that.
What is beyond?
Beyond by organizing party people, using state resources to organize party people.
Is this an assumption, or you have information or evidence to support that?
You see, I want.
Or did you guys do that when you were in power?
The problem that we are facing is as a result of some of these questions.
Okay.
Because if you are not very careful, if I'm in government, then I need to protect it, so that I won't even open the space for discussion. We won't open the space for proper way of managing, because we are not the only country. I'm saying that we are not the only country. We are not the only country that have presidents and they are contesting elections. There are best practices all around.
What do they do in America, for instance?
I don't think that.
I'm sure Obama travels with Air Force One when he's campaigning.
He does. Especially in campaign time, you won't see him really going around with state resources. You understand? Getting to campaign time is the time that Obama will be commissioning school buildings and using it as a basis for campaigning. You understand? You won't see that. There are clear rules regarding that. And I think that if we open up the discussion, we are not so judgmental about it. We are not pointing figures because we want to score political points and do proper. We can really come to a point. There was a time in, I remember 1999, 2000, when the issue of incumbency came up. And John Mahama then was the Minister for Communications. They asked him, is it possible for a president, for instance, who is touring, let's say, northern region, and has a program, for instance, he comes from Bole Bamboy, has a party program in Bole Bamboy. In that situation, what would the president do? In that situation, it is clear. You have your own program of touring the northern region. There's no point in coming to Accra and take private vehicle to drive there. Those ones are understandable. So but if it becomes the norm, where programs of parties, because we have NDC is a political party. Sure. If the NDC is organizing a program for their members and the president attends the program, it is a program organized by the political party.
So under that circumstance, how should the president go? Under
such circumstance, you can say that it is incumbency advantage where he goes there. Okay. It is a political party program for which is the leader of the party, he attends. But if it is a government program and all effort is done to use state resources for personal gains, I don't think any one of us can defend us. You understand? Because we have been in power before, and there's going to be change in 2016. So in looking at these things, we have to look at it in broader terms. I will go for having proper, clear definition of what it is, so that we can be able to draw the thin line sometimes. But sometimes it's a thick line. It's a deliberate attempt to use state resources for one.
I mean, so far we've talked about presidential candidates, but we know that there are ministers who contest for parliament, there are DCUs who contest for parliament. I mean, is that something of interest, or do we just limit the conversation to presidential candidates, Mr. Osayeboa?
See, that is why this whole argument is a bit difficult. You know, with regards to democracies, see, I normally define democracy as war of ideas fought with the weapons of rule of law. And therefore, whatever idea that anyone is promulgating, the person must ensure that there is a law backing that. For that matter, we need to make a definition of the advantage and then the abuse, clearly defined, backed by law. Then it becomes unestablished law. Without that, it's very difficult. We go round and round because the line is very, very thin.
And is it just coincidence that when either NDC or NPP are in power, they don't seem to think it's a big deal to legislate, and yet when they are in opposition, it is? Since you're neutral, maybe you can help me answer that.
You see, in politics is about interest. See, they all try to protect their interests. And whilst you are incumbent, you want to enjoy anything that goes with it. The same thing goes with the Constitution. The Constitution was supposed to have been amended long ago, and then up till now, it has not been amended. Why? When President Kufuor came, he saw that there's a need for him to continue to enjoy all the powers invested in the presidency by the Constitution, and therefore there was no need for them to change. Likewise, the NDC, now from Professor Millstown until now, the Constitution has still not been amended. So it's about the incumbent protecting its interests. And that's all.
1734 across all networks. We're looking at incumbency abuse, whether it's a myth or reality. We'd like to hear some examples if you've come across any in your constituency or in your district. 1734 across all networks. Let me read some of the messages. This one says the president cannot be moving around in taxi. Okay, I think a general made that allusion. We don't expect him to, but we don't also expect him to say vote for me after he goes commissioning things on his tour. So Ishmael Fabosu says use of state assets in campaigning is not a crime, but rather an advantage for the government in power. Nana Kwesi in DC says the spirit of patriotism for the state has turned pure partisan. Think there should be clear rules and regulations going forward. I'm really enjoying this show. Keep it up. Okay, thank you. It's a real incumbency, abuse is real, and both parties are guilty, but it is the state that suffers. Now, they're all loyal to their parties, amassing resources to strengthen their parties instead of the state. There's danger ahead. That's Nana Kwesi in DC. Thank you. We'd like to hear your views as well. 1734 across all networks. I think another area where there tends to be concern about abuse of incumbency is the media. We're going into an election. Is there any clear plan or any clear measurements that will ensure that Party A does not think they've been disadvantaged? Especially between the two of your parties, MPP and NDC, you guys tend to make the most noise.
Well, thank you, Matilda. But let me say that the minority MPs who have been doing these press conferences themselves are the worst offenders in the abuse of incumbency. They are sitting on all the funds, health insurance fund, common fund, whatever fund. All they do is to buy things, distribute them in their areas and say that we are not in government, but this is the little we can give. Then that's what really happens in Parliament now. So they are the worst offenders.
You're talking about the MP's Common Fund, right?
Yes, the MP's Common Fund, the what do you call it? Their health insurance fund.
Is the health insurance fund paid to
They also
MPs?
get something also out of it. They call it monitoring and other things. All they do is put it together. And if you are in opposition, you put it together, buy items and distribute to people, and then tell everybody that, oh, we are not responsible for development projects. The projects are, development projects are the responsibility of a sitting government. So, but we can give you this, we can give you that, personal things, to let the sitting MP look bad. The sitting government, the MPs in the sitting government look bad. It is happening, really happening now. But let's go to this media thing. Happily, I don't see this media thing happening now. Where we have reached. There is so much plurality of media. So we can only talk about the state media. The state media, the state broadcaster, only 2 days ago began a project which involved all political parties, as they've been doing, to discuss how they will play their role in this 2016 campaign. And so I don't see anything happening in that respect that will seek to disadvantage any political party. The problem is with the private media houses, where owners of media houses call people, threaten them, don't do this line, if you do this thing, you lose your job, and so on. That is where the real problem is. But again, it is outside the regulation of government. You cannot do anything about it. They have their money, they have established their media houses. If they choose to sell Kelewele with it, that is their business. But that is really where the problem is.
Let's come to you, John. So it doesn't seem like this is a problem or could be a problem.
You see, I'm so happy about the example educator gave about Parliament. That one, he saw the incumbency clearly, the abuse of incumbency. He saw it
by the MPs.
Because it's coming from the minority. You understand, minority MPs. Forgetting about the fact that you have majority MPs
who also get the same resources.
Actually,
that's
you understand.
true.
Can I?
So let him make his point.
The point I'm making will also help you. The point I'm making is that it's also because there are no clear rules with the use of that funding. Wow. So individuals
and
have
I hold
access,
the two of you, your party's responsible because you are the ones in Parliament.
Individuals have access to it and uses in
to
a way
advantage.
That advantages or give them advantage over the others. You understand? Obviously, because the thing is for the individual, if there are no clear rules, these are bound to be abused. You understand? So I'm happy. It means that it is not a myth to say that incumbency can be abused if there are no clear rules.
So what was the rationale? What would be a rationale, for instance, for Parliament to pass a law that allows that? Is it to protect themselves?
Well, you see, it's like the way our constitution is. A good president don't need such a constitution. A bad president don't deserve it at all. You see, it is made in such a way that you expect that people will be rational, people will work within some common, or people who have morals, you understand?
So they have a conscience.
You have conscience. They will be restricted to what the money is meant for. At the end of the day, most of it will turn up that people use it for their own personal gains. For instance, if you look at the District Assembly Common Fund, for instance, for which MPs have some share. If there are no clear guidelines and rules, these can be used for paying of school fees of party executives, paying of school fees of friends, and all that. I think that we just have to open it up. With regards to the media, like he said, for the private media, it's about ownership. It's about ownership, and the fact that our regulatory body has been failing woefully.
You're talking about which one? National
Media Commission, because there are clear abuse of the media by these personnel. Sometimes even ownership is detached from even actual practitioners. There are examples of people who have political inclination to a particular political party
and use the media.
Not even use the media. They have people within the system who don't ascribe to their political parties, who uses it differently from what the owners believe in and all that. I think that going forward, and I want to believe that this allowing clear political activists, it becomes worse when you go to
be on media, to own media,
to own media houses, use it in the way it is used. If you go outside Accra, that's why Accra monitoring becomes very easy. If you go outside Accra,
worse things happen.
A lot of these stations are owned by politicians. They use it for their purposes.
You are the same politicians who give them the license.
I'm saying that if we don't open up this discussion properly and want to play the usual game where he's an independent candidate, so you play here and play there. I am MPP, so I'll say that there's abuse of incumbency, even if there is not. He is NDC, because of that he will defend the process. I don't think we'll make any head. With the state media, I think that the challenge of GBC, if you remember, early 97 thereabouts, about giving advantage to ruling parties in terms of coverage and all that, has done a lot of good for this nation.